My dad built a business empire but refused to pay for my wedding. Why? My father sat across from me at his favorite steakhouse, the kind where entrees cost $150 and the wine list reads like a mortgage payment. He just finished telling me about closing a $12 million deal that morning. Then I asked if he'd help pay for my wedding and he cut into his Wagyu steak and said, "No. You'll figure it out on your own." Thought he was joking. He wasn't. My father, who'd built a $40 million business empire and spent more on his cars than most people's weddings, refused to contribute a single dollar to mine. I'm Emily Hartwell, I'm 29 years old and I work as a marketing manager making $78,000 a year in Seattle. My father, Richard Hartwell, started with nothing and built Hartwell Manufacturing into one of the most successful industrial equipment companies in the Pacific Northwest. He grew up in poverty, put himself through community college and spent 40 years building his empire one contract at a time. I grew up comfortable but not spoiled. We lived in a nice house in a good neighborhood, but Dad was careful about money. He paid for necessities but taught us that luxuries were earned, not given. My brother James and I had jobs as soon as we were old enough. We paid for our own cars, our own gas, our own entertainment. Dad would match whatever we saved for college, but we had to save first. Money isn't real until you earn it yourself, he'd say. Everything handed to you is just borrowed privilege. I understood his philosophy growing up. I respected the work ethic he'd instilled in us. I got through college with a combination of scholarships, my savings and Dad's matching funds. I got my first job through my own networking, not his connections. I was proud of being independent. But a wedding felt different. This was a family event, a milestone where parents traditionally contribute. And it wasn't like I was asking him to fund a ridiculously extravagant affair. My fiancé Marcus and I had budgeted $45,000 for a simple, elegant wedding with 150 guests. We could afford about $20,000 ourselves, and Marcus's parents were contributing $15,000. We needed $10,000 more to make it work. $10,000. That was what I asked my father for. A man who'd spent $85,000 on his latest Mercedes, who owned a vacation home worth $2 million, who donated six figures annually to charity. I wasn't asking him to fund the whole wedding, just help close the gap. "Dad, it's traditional for the bride's family to contribute to the wedding," I said at that steakhouse dinner. "Marcus's parents are helping. I just need $10,000. "Traditional for families that can't afford to teach their children financial independence," he replied. "You're 29 years old with a good job. If you want a $45,000 wedding, save for it. We've been saving. We have $20,000. But that's not enough for the wedding we want. Then adjust your expectations. Have a smaller wedding. Or save longer. Or pay for it yourself over time. Those are your options. You spend more on your car payment than I'm asking for. My car payment comes from money I earned. Your wedding should come from money you earned. That's the difference." I felt my face getting hot. "So you're saying you won't help at all? Not even as a gift for your only daughter's wedding?" "I'm saying I've already given you the greatest gift a parent can give, the ability to take care of yourself. Use it." I left that dinner furious and humiliated. The waiter had probably overheard the whole conversation, watching a millionaire refuse to help his daughter with her wedding while ordering a $300 bottle of wine. Marcus was supportive when I told him what happened. "We'll figure it out. We can scale back the wedding or wait another year to save more." But I didn't want to scale back. I'd been dreaming about this wedding since I was a little girl. The venue I'd chosen, the photographer, the flowers, the dress. I'd carefully planned everything to stay within a reasonable budget. $45,000 for 150 guests was actually modest compared to the average wedding cost in Seattle. My mother had passed away when I was 12, so I couldn't ask her. My father had remarried 5 years ago to Patricia, a perfectly nice woman who had no obligation to fund my wedding. My brother James had his own financial struggles with a new baby and a mortgage. I was on my own, exactly like Dad intended. Over the next few weeks, I tried different approaches. I sent Dad a detailed budget showing how reasonable our wedding plan was. I explained that his refusal was causing tension with Marcus's family, who'd assumed my father would contribute substantially given his wealth. I even had my fiancé talk to him, thinking maybe man-to-man would work better. Nothing changed his mind. "Emily needs to learn that money isn't magic. It's earned through work and sacrifice. I won't undermine that lesson by writing a check every time something is expensive." I vented to friends, family, anyone who would listen. The reactions were mixed. Some people agreed with Dad, saying I was entitled to expect his money just because he had it. Others thought he was being needlessly cruel, withholding help he could easily afford. "He's teaching you to be independent," my friend Rachel said. "My dad paid for my wedding and now I'm 35 and still financially dependent on my parents. Your dad is doing you a favor. He's being selfish." my friend Morgan countered. Parents who can afford to help their children should help. That's what family means. I started researching average wedding costs, parental contributions, family obligation norms. I found articles supporting both positions. Some financial advisors said parents shouldn't fund adult children's lifestyle choices. Others said weddings were special occasions where family support was appropriate. The more I researched, the more confused I became about what was right. Marcus and I made the difficult decision to scale back our wedding plans. We found a cheaper venue that wasn't quite as beautiful. We cut the guest list to 100 people. We hired a less experienced photographer. We downgraded the flowers, the music, the catering. The new budget was $28,000, which we could just barely afford ourselves. I felt sad every time I made a cut. This wasn't the wedding I'd imagined. But it was the wedding I could afford, and apparently that was the point Dad was trying to make. Then Patricia, my stepmother, called me. Emily, I heard about your father's decision regarding the wedding. I want you to know I disagree with him. You do? Yes. I think he's being unnecessarily rigid. But I also understand where he's coming from. Richard grew up with nothing. His father was an alcoholic who couldn't hold a job. His mother worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. He started working at 12 years old. That shapes a person. I understand his background, but I'm not asking for a handout. I'm asking my father to participate in a family milestone. I know, and I've told him that. But Richard has this deeply ingrained belief that money given too easily creates weakness. He's terrified of raising entitled children who can't function without his money. I'm 29 and financially independent. I'm not some trust fund kid asking for an allowance. He knows that intellectually, but emotionally he can't separate giving money from creating dependence. It's trauma from his childhood manifesting in how he parents you. Patricia offered to contribute $5,000 from her personal savings to help with the wedding. I was touched but declined. Taking money from my stepmother while my father watched felt like it would create more family drama than it solved. The wedding planning continued with our reduced budget. Marcus and I spent hours D&G decorations, calling in favors from friends, finding creative ways to make our budget stretch. It was stressful but also bonding. We were building something together, not just having it handed to us. My brother James called one night. I heard about Dad refusing to help with the wedding. Yeah, it's been fun, I said sarcastically. I want to tell you something I've never told anyone. When Sarah and I got married 8 years ago, Dad offered to pay for the whole wedding. Like wrote us a blank check basically. I sat up straight. What? But you had a tiny wedding at the courthouse. Right. Because I turned him down. Sarah and I wanted to buy a house and I told Dad we'd rather put money toward a down payment than a wedding. He respected that decision and contributed $30,000 to our house fund instead. So he was willing to help you? He was willing to help me make what he considered a smart financial decision. A house was an investment. A wedding was, in his words, one expensive party. That's so insulting. Maybe. But think about it from his perspective. He sees money as a tool for building wealth and security. Spending $45,000 on a single day doesn't make sense in his worldview, no matter how emotionally important that day is. But it's not about the money making sense financially. It's about family and celebration and marking important life moments. I know. I'm not saying he's right. I'm saying I understand his logic, even if I think he's wrong about this. After talking to James, I decided to try one more time with Dad. I invited him to lunch, just the 2 of us, and came prepared with a different approach. Dad, I want to understand your perspective on the wedding money, I started. Can you explain to me why this is so important to you? He seemed surprised by my non-confrontational tone. You really want to know? I do. Because right now I just feel hurt and rejected. I'd like to understand the principle you're standing on. He was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee. When I was 25, I wanted to start my first business. I needed $10,000 for equipment and permits. I asked my father for help and he said no. He said if I couldn't save the money myself, I didn't deserve to be in business. That sounds harsh. It was. I was furious with him. But you know what? I found a way. I worked 3 jobs for 18 months, lived in a studio apartment with 2 roommates, ate ramen for dinner most nights. I saved that $10,000. And when I finally started my business, I valued it more because I'd sacrificed for it. But Dad, you're not your father. And I'm not you. I'm asking for help with a wedding, not capital for a business venture. The principle is the same. Anything worth having is worth working for. If I give you money for this wedding, you'll have a nice party. But if you earn it yourselves, you and Marcus will have something more valuable. The pride of building something together through sacrifice. We're already doing that. We've cut our budget by $17,000. We're D&G everything. We're working together. But we're also stressed and disappointed that we can't have the wedding we originally wanted. Then you're learning an important lesson about budget constraints and prioritization. Those lessons will serve you throughout your marriage when you have to make hard financial decisions together. I realized in that moment that Dad wasn't going to change his mind. This wasn't about the money. It was about his deeply held beliefs about character, work ethic, and self-reliance. Beliefs shaped by growing up poor and building his success through pure grit. I love you, Dad. I respect what you built and how you did it. But I want you to know that your refusal to help hurts. It makes me feel like you care more about teaching me a lesson than supporting me on one of the most important days of my life. His face softened. Emily, I care about you more than you know. But my job as a parent isn't to make you happy in the moment. It's to prepare you for a lifetime of challenges. And that means sometimes letting you struggle. We left that lunch with mutual understanding but no resolution. He wasn't going to help. I was going to have to accept it. The wedding planning continued. Marcus and I found creative solutions for everything. His sister was a talented amateur photographer who offered to shoot the wedding for free. My cousin's band agreed to play for the cost of their dinner. Friends helped make centerpieces. Our venue gave us a discount for booking a Friday instead of Saturday. Slowly the wedding came together. It wasn't the Pinterest-perfect event I'd originally imagined. But it was ours, built through our effort and the generosity of people who loved us. 2 weeks before the wedding, Dad asked to meet with me again. I assumed he wanted to give me some last-minute fatherly advice or perhaps finally offer some financial help now that he'd made his point. Instead, he handed me a leather portfolio. This is for you. Don't open it until after the wedding. What is it? Just promise me you won't look until after you get back from your honeymoon. I promised, confused but too busy with final wedding preparations to think much about it. The wedding day arrived. Our scaled-back DIY wedding with 100 guests in a modest venue. And you know what? It was perfect. Not perfect in the Instagram sense, but perfect in the ways that actually mattered. Marcus cried when he saw me in my dress, which I'd found on sale for $800 instead of the $3,000 one I'd originally wanted. Our friend's band played songs they'd practiced for months just for us. The centerpieces we'd made together looked charming and personal. The venue, while smaller than my original choice, had an intimate warmth that a bigger space wouldn't have had. Dad was there, of course. He walked me down the aisle looking proud. He gave a toast about how Marcus and I had shown the maturity and partnership that would carry us through a lifetime together. He didn't mention the money or the conflict. He was just a father celebrating his daughter's wedding. After the ceremony, several guests commented on how personal and heartfelt everything felt. So many weddings are just cookie-cutter expensive productions, one aunt said. Yours actually felt like you and Marcus. We went to Hawaii for our honeymoon, a trip we'd saved for separately from the wedding budget. When we got back, exhausted and happy, I remembered the leather portfolio Dad had given me. Inside was a check for $35,000 and a letter. Dear Emily, if you're reading this, you've gotten married without my financial help. You've made compromises, worked with Marcus to find solutions, and created something meaningful within your budget. I'm proud of you. This check is not for the wedding. That needed to be yours and Marcus's accomplishment. This money is for your future. A down payment on a house, seed money for a business, a cushion for unexpected expenses. Whatever you need to build your life together. I never doubted I would give you money. The question was when and why. If I'd paid for your wedding, you would have had one beautiful expensive day and learned nothing about handling financial constraints together. By making you find your own way, I've given you something more valuable. Confidence in your ability to solve problems as a team. The money was always yours. I was just waiting until you'd earned the wisdom to use it well. I love you and I'm proud of the woman you've become. Dad. I sat on my couch and cried. Marcus read the letter over my shoulder and started crying too. He was teaching you the whole time, Marcus said. I know. And I hated every minute of it. But he was right. Think about how much we learned planning that wedding on our budget. How much closer we got working through the stress together. If he'd just paid for everything, we would have had a party. Instead, we built something. I called Dad immediately. I opened the portfolio. And, you're an asshole, you know that? You could have just told me you'd help after the wedding. He laughed. If I'd told you, you would have relaxed and not pushed yourselves. The pressure was necessary. I was so angry with you. For months. I know. That was the hardest part for me. Watching you hurt and knowing I was causing it. But Emily, do you understand now why I did it? I thought about the wedding we'd created. The pride I'd felt seeing it come together through our effort. The way Marcus and I had learned to compromise and problem solve under pressure. The confidence I now had that we could handle financial challenges together. Yeah, Dad. I understand. The money I'm giving you now isn't a gift. It's an investment in the life you've proven you can build. You don't need my money to survive, but you can use it to thrive. Marcus and I used the $35,000 as a down payment on our first house. A modest 3-bedroom in a good neighborhood, nothing extravagant but ours. Every mortgage payment we made felt earned because we knew we'd qualified for the loan based on our own financial responsibility, not because Dad had bought us a house. Looking back now, 3 years later, I can see the bigger picture of what Dad was doing. He grew up watching his father take handouts and stay dependent and bitter. He'd built his success through self-reliance and wanted to give his children that gift, even when giving it meant withholding other gifts. Not everyone agrees with his approach. My friends are split. Some think he was brilliant, teaching lessons that will benefit me forever. Others think he was needlessly cruel, putting principles above his daughter's happiness. I've come to believe both things are true. He was right that making us fund our own wedding taught valuable lessons and strengthened our marriage. But he was also wrong to let me suffer through months of hurt and resentment when a simple conversation about his plans could have eased that pain. I could have told you, he admitted over dinner recently. But then you would have been planning your wedding knowing money was coming. You would have made different choices. The lesson required real stakes. Your lesson also required your daughter thinking you didn't care about one of the most important days of her life. I know. That's the cost of the teaching method I chose. I'm not sure I made the right call there. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd get from Richard Hartwell, and honestly it was enough. My brother James and his wife Sarah are planning to renew their vows for their 10th anniversary. James called Dad to ask if he'd contribute to the celebration. Absolutely not, Dad said. You'll fund it yourselves and it will mean more. But what if we want you to contribute as a gift? James asked. Then you're welcome to ask me to contribute to something that builds lasting value. But I don't fund parties, even meaningful ones. That's my principle. James laughed and told me later, at least he's consistent. I've thought a lot about what I'll do with my own kids someday. Will I use Dad's approach, making them fund their own milestones to teach self-reliance? Or will I be more generous, believing that supporting your children's happiness is more important than making them struggle for lessons? I honestly don't know. Both approaches have merit. Both have cost. What I do know is that my wedding, cobbled together on a tight budget with help from friends and our own creativity, means more to me than it would have if Dad had written a check. Not because the lessons Dad wanted to teach were more valuable than having my dream wedding, but because Marcus and I built something together. We solved problems. We compromised. We proved to ourselves we could handle hard things as a team. And when challenges come up in our marriage now, financial or otherwise, we have this reference point. Remember when we pulled off our wedding with $28,000? We can handle this. That confidence is worth something. Maybe not $35,000 worth. Maybe not worth the months of resentment and hurt. But something. Dad's parenting style isn't for everyone. It requires being comfortable with your children's temporary anger. It requires believing that long-term growth is more important than short-term happiness. It requires the privilege of knowing your children have safety nets even when you're not providing them. Not every parent can afford to teach through withholding. Some parents genuinely can't help financially. Some can help but shouldn't because their children aren't ready for financial responsibility. And some, like Dad, can help and choose not to specifically because they can afford to teach expensive lessons. I'm grateful for the lesson, but I'm also still a little angry about the method. And I think both those feelings can coexist. The leather portfolio Dad gave me sits on my desk now, empty except for the letter. I've read it dozens of times, seeing different things each time. Sometimes I see a father's love expressed through difficult teaching. Sometimes I see a man projecting his childhood trauma onto his parenting. Usually I see both. Marcus and I are talking about having kids soon. We've saved responsibly for it just like we saved for our wedding and our house. Dad's lessons have shaped how we think about money and values and self-reliance. But I've also promised myself that when my daughter gets married someday, I'll at least have a conversation with her about my plans. I'll teach her about financial responsibility and self-reliance, but I won't make her spend months thinking I don't care about her happiness. Maybe that makes me weaker than Dad. Or maybe it makes me a different kind of parent. One who learned from his lessons but chose to teach differently. Dad says the mark of good parenting is raising children who do better than you did. Not financially, he clarifies. Emotionally. Relationally. In the ways that actually matter. By that measure, maybe refusing to pay for my wedding while planning to help all along was the right move. It taught me about money, marriage, and self-reliance. It also taught me about the limits of tough love and the importance of communication in relationships. Those lessons are worth something. Maybe not $35,000 worth to everyone, but to me, looking back now with perspective and a paid-off wedding, they're valuable. I just wish the tuition for those lessons hadn't included months of thinking my father valued principles more than he valued me. But that's the thing about tough love, isn't it? It only works if the child eventually understands the love underneath the toughness. And that understanding only comes with time and perspective. I have both now. So I can finally say what I couldn't say 3 years ago when Dad refused to help with my wedding. Thank you, Dad, for teaching me hard lessons in hard ways. For caring more about who I'd become than how I'd feel in the moment. For giving me money only after I'd proven I didn't need it. And also, please don't do this with my future kids. I've learned the lesson. They don't need to. Thanks for sticking with me through this story. It's complicated and messy like most family relationships involving money. If you made it to the end, drop a comment about your experiences with parents and financial support. I love reading all your comments,